When you see an astronaut just floating out there in the silence of space, what do you think is the single most dangerous part of their job? We're about to break down how they survive this invisible threat that's, well, more relentless than pretty much anything here on Earth. Okay, let's get into it. So, I gotta ask you, what do you think is the absolute deadliest part of a spacewalk? I'm willing to bet the answer is not what you think it is. Is it running out of oxygen? I mean, that's a terrifying thought for sure, but their life support systems are incredibly robust. We're talking multiple backups. So, nope, that's not it. Okay, what about getting pinged by a tiny little rock that's moving thousands of miles an hour? Micrometeoroids are definitely a real danger, no doubt, but they are not the number one threat. Or maybe, getting untethered and just floating off into the void? It's a classic movie nightmare, but in the real world, astronauts have multiple tethers and safety systems to make sure that doesn't happen. The deadliest part of a spacewalk is the thing you can't see, you can't feel, you can't even hear. It's a constant, silent storm of high-energy particles. It's radiation. And that brings us right to our first section, the invisible killer. So how deadly is this invisible storm, really? Yeah, this really says it all. Once you leave our planet's magnetic shield, space isn't empty. It's more like being inside a cosmic sandblaster, just constantly getting pelted by protons and heavy ions that can literally rip right through your DNA. And to put this into perspective, just look at this table from NASA. These units, grays and sieverts, they measure the biological damage from radiation. In just 30 days, an astronaut is allowed to absorb 3 times the radiation dose to their skin that a nuclear power plant worker is allowed to get in an entire year. The risks are so huge that the safety limits themselves have to be pushed to the absolute edge. So how do you survive that? Well, you don't just put on some clothes, you wear a machine. And that brings us to the solution, the astronaut's own personal spaceship. This is the Extravehicular Mobility Unit, or the EMU, and it's really a collection of all these complex parts. You've got the hard upper torso, the helmet, the arms, and that big life support backpack that keeps the whole show running. For all intents and purposes, this thing is a one-person spacecraft. But the real secret, the thing that actually stops those cosmic bullets, is hidden from view. So right now, we're going to peel back the layers and take a look at the anatomy of this incredible armor. What you are looking at here is a cross-section of the suit's arm. And it's not just one layer. It is a mind-boggling 14 layers of meticulously engineered material. Every single one has a very specific, life-saving job to do. The very outer layer is this custom blend called orthofabric. It's got Teflon so it can slide without snagging, Nomex for fire resistance, and Kevlar. Yep, the same stuff in bulletproof vests to basically shred any tiny micrometeoroids that get in the way. Just underneath that is where the temperature control really begins. You've got multiple paper-thin layers of aluminized mylar. So whether you're in the crushing cold of space's shadow or the blistering heat of direct sunlight, these layers act like a super advanced thermos, bouncing heat in or out, whatever's needed. Okay, now we're getting to the core of life support. There's a urethane-coated nylon bladder that acts like a balloon, holding in the breathable air. But if it was just a balloon, it would swell up and get totally rigid. So the really crucial part is the layer outside of it, a tough Dacron fabric that acts as a restraint, keeping the suit shape and letting the astronaut actually move around. And the innermost layer? It's basically a personal air conditioner. It's called the liquid cooling and ventilation garment, and it's this full-body suit with about 60 meters, that's over 190 feet, of tiny tubes woven right into it. Cool water is constantly circulating, pulling all that excess body heat away, so the astronaut doesn't boil inside their own suit. So we've got pressure, we've got temperature, and we've got micrometeoroids covered. But how does this complicated textile sandwich stop the invisible killer, the radiation? Well, it works a lot like a bulletproof vest, but for subatomic particles. When a high-energy proton from, say, a solar flare slams into the suit, the outer layers take that initial impact. Then each layer after that, the fabric, the mylar, the nylon, it shaves off a little bit more of that particle's energy, slowing it down, until what actually gets through to the astronaut is far, far less harmful. This slide actually shows you what that looks like in a simulation. That colorful beam, that's radiation hitting a cross-section of the suit.
You can see how the energy, the reds and oranges, is highest on the outer layers, and then it just rapidly drops to green and blue as it gets absorbed layer by layer. This makes that invisible threat suddenly look very real, doesn't it?
But here's the thing. This technology is not a final solution. Protecting astronauts from radiation is a never-ending battle. And believe me, the challenges are only getting bigger. Engineers are always planning for even bigger threats. You have these sudden, violent solar proton events, these massive, unpredictable bursts of energy from the sun. You have the persistent belts of trapped electrons just hanging out in orbit. And then you have the hardest ones to stop, galactic cosmic rays. These are the super heavy, high-energy leftovers from distant supernovas that can punch through almost anything. All of these just get exponentially more dangerous on a long trip to the moon or Mars, far away from Earth's protection. Which brings us to that final, critical question. The EMU is an absolute masterpiece of engineering that keeps astronauts safe near home. But as we start setting our sights on deep space, is it strong enough for the journey to Mars?